Erin Teressa Lawrence, known by her family and friends as Pepper, lived in Cove, Arkansas, a small rural community surrounded by woods, hills, and the quiet pace of a close-knit town. Born around 1980, she was about 40 years old at the time she vanished. Erin was 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighed about 120 pounds, and had sandy hair. She was a daughter, a friend, and a woman with people who cared deeply about her well-being. Cove, Arkansas is not a large place. It is the kind of area where neighbors tend to know one another, and where a person's disappearance does not go unnoticed. It is the kind of place where a missing individual echoes through the entire county, and it did not take long for her absence to be felt. On April 2, 2020, Erin was last seen. She disappeared without explanation. Reports were made to authorities, and her case was quickly entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as NamUs. From the very beginning, her family, friends, and community members worried. Erin had not indicated she intended to go anywhere. There was no farewell, no message to suggest she was planning a trip or leaving home. Her disappearance was abrupt, and almost immediately concerns grew that something serious had happened to her. The Polk County Sheriff's Office opened an investigation. Deputies searched for signs of her whereabouts, but days passed, and no firm evidence surfaced. Erin's description circulated through missing persons posters. Flyers were printed with her height, weight, and hair color. Appeals were made to the public, asking if anyone had seen her or had information. Her nickname, Pepper, was emphasized in hopes that someone might recognize her under that name and call in with a lead. As weeks turned into months, the hope of finding her safe became harder to hold on to. For more than 2 years, Erin's family waited for news. Law enforcement never closed her case, but the lack of new leads left investigators without answers to share. During this time, local organizations kept her case visible. Online groups added her photo to databases, and the community reminded each other that Erin was still missing. The question weighed heavily. What had happened to Pepper Lawrence? Then, in September of 2022, the silence finally broke. Inmate information led investigators to a site in the woods west of Hatfield, Arkansas, not far from where Erin had lived. It was a remote location, thick with trees and brush, the kind of terrain where a search without direction would have been nearly impossible. Law enforcement officers went to the site and uncovered a shallow grave. The remains found there were sent to the Arkansas State Crime Laboratory. Within days, confirmation arrived. Remains belonged to Erin Teressa Lawrence. The discovery brought heartbreak to her family and community. After more than 2 years of hoping for her safe return, the confirmation of her death was devastating. But it also meant the investigation could finally move forward. The grave provided evidence, and the case shifted from a missing persons search to a criminal investigation. Authorities soon named a suspect. His name was Jerry L. Hopper, a man in his mid-40s from Cove. Hopper was already incarcerated at the time, serving time in the Arkansas Department of Corrections on unrelated matters. On February 1, 2023, he was arraigned in Polk County Circuit Court. He faced multiple charges. Among them were second-degree murder, kidnapping, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and the use of a communication device during the commission of a felony. At that first hearing, he entered a plea of not guilty. The case against Hopper moved forward. Prosecutors prepared to prove their charges, while Hopper, already behind bars, faced the likelihood of additional years added to his sentence. After less than 2 weeks, however, a shift occurred. On February 13, 2023, Jerry Hopper changed his plea. He pled guilty to second-degree murder in connection with the death of Erin Lawrence. By pleading guilty, Hopper avoided a trial, and in turn, the state did not proceed with all of the original charges. The plea secured his responsibility in the case and established accountability in a legal sense. The Arkansas Department of Corrections recorded his conviction. His parole eligibility date was set for February 7, 2028. For Erin's family, this meant a form of closure. Someone was officially held responsible, but it also raised new questions. Why second degree instead of first degree? Why a plea deal? And what exactly happened in April of 2020? The answers remain unclear. No official public record details the exact circumstances of Erin's final moments. Authorities have not disclosed the specific cause of her death. The plea agreement means many details were never laid out in court. The motive remains undisclosed. What connection, if any, Hopper had to Erin before her disappearance is not widely known. The grave itself was described as shallow, suggesting the attempt to conceal Erin's body was hurried. That it took an inmate's information to lead investigators to the site emphasizes how difficult the search terrain was and how hidden her resting place had been. Questions remain about why the inmate came forward when they did, and whether more people might have been aware of what happened earlier. For Erin's family, the waiting had stretched from April 2020 until September 2022. That entire time they lived with uncertainty, never knowing if they would see her again, never knowing if her case would be solved. The confirmation of her remains ended the waiting, but it also ended the possibility of reunion. The legal outcome: Hopper's guilty plea and eventual parole eligibility was a resolution in the eyes of the court, but not in the hearts of Erin's loved ones. Some questioned whether justice was fully served. Others accepted that at least someone had been held accountable. For a community that had searched and hoped, the end of the case brought a mix of closure and continuing grief. Since Hopper's plea, no additional suspects have been named. No new arrests have been made in connection with Erin's death. There is no evidence that others were directly involved, though the original charges suggested authorities once believed there may have been more complexities. To date, Hopper remains the sole person convicted in connection with Erin's disappearance and death. Her story has since been included in true crime coverage online, in podcasts, and on missing persons awareness sites. Her name as profile remains a record of her case, though now listed with status resolved. For many in Polk County, the memory of Erin is tied not only to the sadness of her disappearance, but also to the reminder that even in small communities, safety cannot be assumed. The length of time between Erin's disappearance and the recovery of her remains is a striking part of this case. For more than 2 years, the mystery remained. Families of missing individuals often describe those years as the most painful part of the experience, the not knowing. Every day presents the possibility of new information, but also the dread of bad news. The eventual discovery, though tragic, at least allowed Erin's family to lay her to rest properly. The parole eligibility of Hopper in 2028 means the case is not entirely closed in the eyes of the public. When that date comes closer, Erin's family will have the option to speak at hearings, to provide victim impact statements, and to argue whether Hopper should or should not be released. Until then, he remains incarcerated, serving the sentence tied to his plea agreement. Looking at the broader picture, Erin's case illustrates the challenges faced by law enforcement in missing persons investigations. Initial searches in rural areas can be extremely difficult. Thick woods, uneven ground, and private lands make large-scale searches complicated. Even when investigators suspect foul play, the lack of immediate physical evidence can delay progress. It also shows how critical information from individuals, even those incarcerated, can sometimes break open a case. The discovery of Erin's remains in 2022 was the turning point. Without that tip, it is possible her case would still be unsolved today. Her story is one that highlights the importance of persistence in investigations and the role of community members, no matter who they are, in providing information. Today, Erin Teressa Lawrence is remembered by her family and friends, not just for the tragedy of her death, but for the life she lived. She was a person with people who cared about her, the presence in a small Arkansas town, and with a name that will not be forgotten by those who knew her. The unresolved details of her case may never all be answered, but the essential facts remain. She disappeared in April 2020. She was found more than 2 years later, and a man named Jerry L. Hopper pled guilty to second-degree murder and is serving time in the Arkansas prison system with parole eligibility in 2028. This story is a reminder of how fragile life can be, how quickly circumstances can change, and how important it is to keep the memory of missing persons alive. It is also a reminder to families facing similar circumstances that persistence and community support matter. Even when months and years pass, Erin's case was not solved quickly, but in the end, her family was given answers, and the person responsible was held accountable. Though the legal proceedings have concluded, Erin's story will continue to resonate. It will continue to serve as an example of why missing persons cases cannot be ignored, why tips must be followed, and why every life matters, whether in a small town like Cove or anywhere else. Erin's name will remain part of the record, and her memory will live on through those who loved her and continue to speak her name. Thank you for watching Fatal Secrets of True Crime. Subscribe for more stories like this. Real crimes, hidden truths, and the secrets they tried to bury. Your support helps keep these stories alive and the pressure on for answers. Till next time, remember, every secret eventually comes to light.